Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 44 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. In every other of the 43 episodes prior to this, it's been James doing the intro. It's odd that I'm saying it this time because James isn't here. We talked about it on the last podcast. He's got work obligations that are pulling him every which way for the time being. But I think I've hit the jackpot on a guest co-host, and that's putting the expectations very high on Charlie Black. Charlie has had not only extensive experience in the hockey world, but his experience in the hockey world has been so diversified and unique in so many ways that it's a pleasure to have him on to talk about both his own experience and to talk about the NHL in general, talk about junior hockey in general. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Aiden, thank you so much for having me. That this is an insane amount of hype. I hope I live up to it. But I'm feeling good. I'm excited to be here for episode 44, the Todd Bertuzzi episode, if you will. Eric Goodbranson, Roman Hammerlick, Vladislav Gavrikov. Take your pick. Tons of great 44s out there.
Todd Bertuzzi, yeah, that's the Canucks standout, obviously. 43 last time, I guess that was the Quinn Hughes episode. And the 45 that's always in my head because I loved this guy when I was a kid. He was coming up at the same time that I was getting into hockey. Do you remember Jordan Schrader?
Oh, I remember Schrader quite keenly. He's not only a former Canuck, but also a former Blue Jacket. So, Great Canadian Hockey Podcast fans, I am a massive Blue Jackets fan. You're going to learn that pretty quick here. So, I see a fair bit. I've seen a fair bit of like players from the Canucks fans to be familiar with eventually make their way over to Columbus and do decently. I'm looking at you, Brendan Gaunce. But yes, Schrader, fantastic guy. Just maybe didn't live up to that first round pedigree, but is a incredibly serviceable player who can hold things down in just about any situation.
So I'll say this right now. I don't know if I've ever actually said this to you, Charlie, but this is entirely very true. If there's ever a hockey fact that I Google and it doesn't pop up right away, I think I need to do some digging. And I just, the answer seems to elude me when I'm looking for something. In the back of my head, I always have the like, I'll text Charlie and he'll 100% know the answer to this. And that's kind of the hockey fan that you are. You're the and I have on our rundown here. How does one become a hockey historian? Because you are as close to as anybody I've ever met. So this wide variety, and you've already in the very short time of this podcast, we've already managed to name drop how many different guys that I never would have had on the bingo card to come up in this podcast. So
Grant Clitsome.
there's another one. So Charlie, like, and I'm a hockey nerd and I pride myself on that, but you take it to a very admirable extra level. So tell me about you and hockey and how it came to this.
Well, I wouldn't say there's any real secret to it. I think it's just with the way that I enjoy hockey and the way that I take things in. I retain a lot of knowledge, whether this is for the best or for the worst. It's usually hit and miss, but when I learn something, it's very hard for me to forget it. So I just end up having a ton of names, frivolities, minutiae kind of baked in. I am a jersey nut. I have a massive collection. I'd say I'm pushing about 300 jerseys now, and that was after some severe downsizing that I did a few years ago. The collection just kind of built itself back up. But I'm a massive nerd for jersey numbers, why players choose the numbers that they do, the significance behind them. It's always very engaging to me. I love the storylines that come into it through hockey, and it's just the way I've come to realize I have yet to find anybody else. And I know there's people out there. There are most likely people out there who watch and enjoy and consume hockey in a similar way at the very least. But when I think about it, it's a big old soap opera to me. It's all about storylines. It's all about the dramatic twists. It's all about the stranger than fiction. You can't write this stuff kind of things that happen in the world of sports, and it's thrilling to me. I just find myself completely surrounded and consumed by a, a deeply immersive world where anything is possible, and it's just it's so damn cool. I'm at a bit of a loss for words about it, which is not a good sign for my first stint as a podcast guest, but that's how that's how it usually kind of goes. A little bit of background about me, some of that diverse experience that you were hyping me up with, Aiden, is that I've been a number of different roles in hockey, but one of my most prominent, my favorite roles is as the PA announcer and DJ for a number of minor hockey and junior hockey teams. And I've got to be around for some pretty cool experiences. And I think that's another part of it is I don't know about if I'm necessarily a hockey historian, but I like to think that I'm around for a lot of cool moments, and whether that's widely known as like people saying, "Oh yeah, I was there when Bobby Orr scored the goal that beat the St. Louis Blues and saw him diving through the air." Like that's awesome. I can't say anything like that, but I've I've gone to the rink for a school day game pre-pandemic in South Surrey Arena, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and the building was full of shouting children, and it was one of the most fun times I've ever had at a hockey arena. Just absolute bedlam. There were fights. There was just sheer chaos everywhere. I'd been to another school day game at another BCHL rink, and the DJ there was playing some interesting selections as when it comes to music. They were playing things like the Sesame Street theme and things geared towards preschoolers, which was a choice. I'm not saying it was the wrong choice necessarily, but it was definitely a little jarring to be around for, and I have a feeling that I know the selections weren't for me. Like I wasn't the target demographic of that game, but even the kids that would have been there, I can imagine there might have been some odd reactions. But then flash forward to me at this school day game as the DJ, and I've just got this army of screaming children just getting hype as hell on concession hot dogs and ill-gotten sugars. And there's like, play Mo Bamba, play Sicko Mode, play XXX Tentacion. And I'm just like, absolutely. I got clean versions of all of this. Let's go.
That's probably for me right now on the list of things that I kind of hit myself for missing out on it is a school day game because it just the stars because of COVID or just different times where I would have been involved in teams. I've always missed out on that. And for junior hockey, that's part of why I'm proud to be so involved in junior hockey and have contributed as much as I have to it in my career so far is because me getting into hockey wasn't in at the time it would have been General Motors Place, but that's not where it was. It was at the time in the Pacific Coliseum watching the Vancouver Giants, right? Like it's for so many kids, junior hockey is the segue into the sport, and obviously you just described such a such a vivid and fun, happy memory to do with getting kids and involved and excited in junior hockey, and that's that just definitely that speaks to a piece of me that's equally proud of my involvement in it. And yeah, so Charlie and I got to know each other when I was working for a production company, and he was the assistant general manager of the Surrey Eagles in the British Columbia Hockey League. And we had our paths cross in that capacity, and then just became friends pretty much right from there. And um, like it's been a lot of fun, Charlie, knowing you and having both of our careers grow at the same time. So you most recently in hockey were involved in the Powell River Kings and the Powell River Kings organization. You had a full-time role in the office, which you stepped aside from to take on simply a game day role and another job. But Powell River has become home to you thanks to that position with the Kings. So tell me about how, and this is kind of a specific question, so if you don't have an answer right off the top of your head, just let me know. But
No worries.
how was it integrating into a community through a role in hockey? Because obviously when you move somewhere, you're new, you don't know too many people, but when you move to a community because of the hockey team, and of course in a community like Powell River, such an important piece of the community, like how was it getting integrated within the locals and the people and the culture in the role you had in the hockey team?
Oh my gosh, it was a whirlwind experience to say the least. But I'll back it up a little further. Even back during my Surrey Eagles days, I remember I was on random road trips. Usually, almost always, it was of my own volition. I was never invited along to join in on road trips with the Eagles. It was simply, oh hey, they're playing on the island this weekend, and I don't have anything planned, so I'm gonna go book an Airbnb somewhere and just go to the game later on that day, be on my own schedule, and just check it out, have some fun. And so I did this with a lot of the Coastal Conference rinks. I'm not as well traveled as I'd like to be, but I'm slowly working my way through all of the BCHL rinks in my travels. I've got 5 new rinks to add to this, although I guess I can already cross off Grant Fuhr Arena. I got to see a Spruce Grove game, obviously pre BCHL, because this was right before the pandemic shut down. But I digress. One of those trips, one of those fateful trips, I wanted to go see a game in Powell River. I had no personal connection to the community other than the fact that once upon a time, my grandfather who raised me worked in a sawmill, and he went over to do some work in Powell River to help out at their paper mill. And this was back in the 80s. So that was the only tangential connection that I even had to the community. I had nothing else that was kind of drawing me in other than the hockey. So joining on this random road trip in my own vehicle, and I'm driving up Highway 101 past Seashelt. It's a frosty December morning, and I'm driving through a little area, a little town called Madeira Park, and the hoarfrost on the trees was just picturesque. It was like driving through a snow globe, specifically a snow globe that had not been shaken at all. It was the first sign that, hey, something really special is ahead here. And so it became that I get to the ferry terminal to get on the second of 2 boats to get from the lower mainland of BC to Powell River, the north end of the Sunshine Coast. It's not on Vancouver Island. A lot of people think it's on the island. It is not. It is firmly attached to the mainland, but thanks to deep fjords and rugged mountain passes, it is impossible to build a connected roadway. It's possible, but who's got $1.2 billion laying around? Uh, we get to Powell River. I get to Powell River. I'm using the royal we. My apologies. And I'm immediately taken in by just the sheer magnetism of it. There was something in my soul saying, "This place is special. This place is awesome. This is a community. This is people who care about one another. This is a town that loves their hockey and loves their hockey team. And if I ever become a free agent, this is where I want to be. This is the number one destination." And lo and behold, it was the spring of 2022. My time with the Surrey Eagles had come to a close, and all I could think of was, how do I get to Powell River? So I dropped a couple of emails, made a few connections, opened up some conversations with people I had been chatting with previously, and we found out there was a mutual fit. And by that summer, everything was all locked in and ready to go, and I found myself leaving the Greater Vancouver area for the first time in my life and living somewhere else. Obviously, it's not too far away. 6 hour drive when you include the ferry travel, but Powell River as a community was just immediately welcoming. And the point where I realized this was pretty early on when I was getting on the ferry to move all of my stuff over at the end of August. And I had multiple people on that sailing all say they recognized my photo from the newspaper. I apparently was page 23 news, but I was news nonetheless. Myself and my roommate Harry Mahesh, who had been hired as a assistant coach, we were both announced in the local newspaper. Our photos just beaming ear to ear. The both of us, Harry and I, would become roommates and brothers for life. He's with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization now, which is amazing. But I can wax poetic about how much of a beauty Harry Mahesh is another time, because we're talking about Powell River and why this place is so distinct and so unique, and just as mentioned, the community. Uh, people knew who I was right away, and that was a little jarring, but it was it was so cool to hit the ground running and immediately build up that relationship to the community and in the community, thanks to people who, when the team's winning, they're at the games. When the team's losing, they're still at the games. They're there no matter what. The lineups for players to sign autographs is always just about out the door post game. No matter what the results of the game is, the team can get honestly blown out of the water, and the fans still show up. It's incredibly gratifying to be part of that experience and to be in that game day role and to entertain those fans. There's nothing like it. I've always said that I consider myself to have one of the coolest jobs that there is, and I maintain that to this day. Like there's nothing cooler than being involved with the entertainment side of a hockey team, and there's no better place to feel that energy than Powell River, British Columbia. Go Kings! Wow, that became a lot more partisan than I thought it was going to be.
That was awesome, Charlie. Don't apologize for any part of that, because no, that's very well put. And like, obviously I met you with the Eagles and always knew that you were from Surrey, but now the question is Powell River home? Is this where you think you're gonna stay?
Yeah, there's no way to really be able to forecast exactly what the future holds, but uh, because there's been a few factors, obviously, that come up in life. Opportunities say, hey, you could move back down to the city or go back to Surrey or to Vancouver in general and be able to do some cool stuff. Or there was this yearning in my soul a few years ago that I could never explain. I never followed up on it, but there was something saying, hey, get your ass out to the Maritimes, just because you got nothing there, but you've never been. It'd be cool, right? And I could not shut this thought off in my mind for a long time. I would have actually traveled out there if it had not been for something that happened in the spring of 2020. I can't really put my finger on what it was, but anyways, my travel plans got interrupted. So did a few other people. But I felt that same kind of calling when I came to Powell River. And this is a place that is, I could definitely be, putting down some serious roots. And I want to be a lifer here. Like this community is just special. It defies logic. It defies proper expression. It's just so nice here. It's There's a calm about it. You're not that far away from the city. You're not that close either, where it's you feel that kind of carryover, but you're also not as isolated as people tend to believe that you are in Powell River. It's it's a special place, and if I spend the rest of my days here, I think I'd be a very, very happy man. Of course, if I end up elsewhere, then there's always going to be that. Hey, I remember when I used to live in Powell River. That was awesome. And so, no matter what the universe has in store for me, this is home. Powell River is an amazing place to be, and at this rate, I feel like I should be on the tour, the Powell River tourism payroll. So, can I submit this as part of an application, Aiden?
Well, as much as it's tourism, it's also a petition for people to move there because you've sold it as a community more than more than just for visitors, but for everybody who wants to, experience that sense of community, which is I'm really glad that, obviously both in hockey and just in life you're enjoying the location. So kind of moving more into the specifics of hockey. James and I talked about this on our last podcast. I kind of acknowledged both the position I had in the Alberta Junior Hockey League and then subsequently the position I have with a broadcast company who has a client that is Hockey Canada. But Charlie, British Columbia
Yeah,
Hockey League is growing into this big, somewhat unknown entity, and it's developing into it's not major junior, but it's as close as it's ever been. And tell me about how excited you are to both be in the community where the team is so prevalent and be with the team in a league that continues to grow and grow.
it's it's a it's such a fun and staggering paradigm shift to be around for. I as a as both of us being on the younger side of things, like I'm a 92 birth year, and not like I ever played hockey or anything, but um I'm a 92, so I was obviously not around when the Western Hockey League in its current form came to be, and how the face of junior hockey changed so drastically um, throughout the 60s and 70s. It was it was a truly it was a truly incredible time back then, and I can only picture that what we're experiencing right now with the growth of the BCHL expanding into Alberta through 5 new but established member clubs, and the conversations that come up about further expansion opportunities. Seattle, for example, has come up. Quesnel has come up a few times. I'm not going to spend the entire time speculating on where the BCHL could relocate or expand to, but the fact is, it's such an exciting time to be part of. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty that's felt from a little bit from within of what is this going to become, what is our goal here, what is this growing into, but also from people who are seeing it from the outside and saying, why would they want to leave Hockey Canada? Why would they want to go non-sanctioned? Oh, they're a rebel league now. Why would they want to do this? But the fact is, being around it, being in the eye of the storm, as it were, it just leads to this gradual but yet accelerating increase of the caliber of hockey, and the caliber specifically of college tracking junior hockey, where now with access to more players with larger rosters, increased opportunities for players to be seen, be noticed, and be found, and get those Division 1, Division 3 commits. Even those who move on to U Sports have done very well for themselves in the BCHL. It's the acceleration into how the league is really stepping into its own, definitely in Canada, as the premier option for if you want to go to school and you want to get if you want to get that Division 1 commit. There's only one place you should be, and it's the BCHL, and that is so thrilling. I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of players over the last year, ongoing, and throughout the BCHL and throughout junior hockey realms that I would have never met before. The uh, non-North American import players that are playing in the league now. You meet some awesome young men who are working towards getting their college commitments, and they're following a path, they're following a calling. They're good at what they do, and they're brought into amazing communities like this one, like Powell River or Surrey or Black Falls, Brooks. These are the places to be. It's becoming a destination for junior hockey players in a grand and beautiful way. And case in point, one of the players that I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last little bit, for the Powell River Kings, is 20-year-old forward Simone Daddier. He hails from Italy. He was playing for the North Iowa Bulls in the North American Hockey League prior to being picked up by the Kings. And as a player from Italy without a North American address, he wouldn't have been able to play in the BCHL last year. The new roster rules and the brave new world that's come about from the BCHL making the moves that it has means that a player of his caliber can now ply his trade for the best possible option to, help his team be better. And he started out on a point per game pace, joining the team in December, and just bringing this intensity, this culture of competitiveness to the locker room, advancing the team's best interest, advancing his best interest. He just earned a commit to play for Colgate in Div 1 NCAA. And this is a huge part of why I'm proud to be in junior hockey. Like, Simone is just one example of many of players that I've had the pleasure of meeting that just they come here to be better, to elevate their game and play against the best possible competition, get that education, get their future secured. And the BCHL, one of their slogans that I still apply to them today is smart hockey. Obviously, they're trending more towards their new slogan of modern hockey, which is also incredibly accurate. But smart hockey is just it's the perfect way to describe what's going on and how the league is building towards becoming this powerhouse. You hear rumors, and there's always fun rumors that percolate throughout junior hockey and online forums. The few that I'm going to mention here should not be taken as any sort of furthering of rumors. I'm not here to propagate that sort of thing. I'm just here to note what I've heard, what I've seen, and it shouldn't be taken as any sort of speculation or anything imminent. But I only say this because it's come up in the past about, the BCHL wants to join the USHL and they're going to become a new Northwest division. And you hear things like this all the time. It's equal parts silly or intriguing. And it's all these rumors about what the league has in store and what they have planned next. There's always this tentative excitement. And as much as I hate to quote from certain artists, a lot of the negative comes down to are you going to hate from outside the club though? And that's where I think a lot of this because as mentioned, there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of uncertainty, and that turns into almost a fear or a concern of what are they doing there. So you hear a lot of this messaging that comes about from Hockey Canada adjacent programs about you don't want to go non-sanctioned. It's you want to make sure you're where you're protected and where you have the best access. But at the same token, the BCHL is it hasn't become this backwater operation that people normally associate with non-Hockey Canada sanctioned programming. It's still that strong basis, that foundation of what junior hockey should be, and especially with college tracking junior hockey being more geared towards speed and skill and education as opposed to more physically oriented leagues. Certainly, I know I'm kind of talking myself in circles, but it's thrilling to be a part of. It's thrilling to see just how everything's coming together. And one of the places that I have done some sports announcing in my career is I've done a fair bit in the equestrian world. And one of my places that I ply my trade at in the summer times is Thunderbird Show Park. It's a facility in Fort Langley that has hosted tons of incredible events. And athletes of incredible calibers, everything from kids on their first ponies to Olympians, literal Olympic athletes, the best of the best. Everyone comes to Fort Langley on the circuit to ride their horses, and it's a truly cool place to be. But the reason I bring them up in this context is because the one of the founders of the show park had this mantra that she always lived by. She said, "I want people to always be thinking, what are they going to do at Thunderbird next year? What are they doing this year?" Always to have that positivity, that excitement about what the next move is, how are they going to keep making things better? How are they going to keep improving? It's thrilling to be a part of, and I find myself asking the same questions like, "Oh, what's new in the BCHL this year?" It's just, I mean, we can start a drinking game about how many times I've used the word thrilling.
Well, I'm really glad I asked you that because, like again, last episode we chatted about it a little bit. I've only got my perspective, so I'm stoked to get your perspective on it. And obviously, I'm super happy with how you're feeling about it because, it's uncertainty, right, with an unsanctioned league, and the uncertainty can lead to a sense of, the impending anxiety of what's next. Is something going to go wrong? Or the uncertainty can lead to the every door is open, we have nowhere to go but up, and that's obviously where it's gone for the British Columbia Hockey League. So for all the athletes and the coaches involved, that's obviously a good thing. The player you mentioned, Simone of Powell River, worth mentioning that he got his Colgate University commit from the Powell River Kings. It wasn't from North Iowa playing in the States. It was, he went to Powell River, he proved himself, and then he got the NCAA Division I commit. Also worth mentioning very quickly, he was a 20-year-old, was he not? So this was his make it or break it season to get the NCAA Division I commit. He's a 2003 born, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously very
Yes,
cool
indeed.
for him to hit that in a season in which, when you're a 20-year-old in junior hockey vying for an NCAA Division I commit, that it's if you don't get it, all of a sudden you're looking for a Div 3 spot, a U Sports spot, or a professional contract. And there's so much more uncertainty when you don't have that commit locked down. So it's obviously super exciting for him that he did get that commitment locked down. Charlie, thank you so much for talking about that and about yourself. Let's move on to the National Hockey League, because it's been a while since James and I did a podcast. So Charlie's going to be the fill-in to go over some news and go over some trade rumors. News to start, I think, has to be the Edmonton Oilers. 16 consecutive victories. Charlie, it's always fun to witness history. Unfortunately, if that's something that, everybody was hoping for, they came up just short. Pittsburgh's winning streak in the 1990s of 17 straight games stands as the record. Edmonton wins 16 straight. They've won 2 of 4 since the streak ended. They lost to Vegas, of course, 3-1. That would have been their 17th straight win. They beat Anaheim. They lose to LA. They put up 8 on Detroit tonight, including 6 assists from Connor McDavid. So the Oilers, who came so close to the NHL record, look like they're going to just continue rolling, take the loss as the bump in the road, keep on going. Charlie, obviously, you said you're a Columbus fan. I'm the one that's kind of more regionally adjacent to the hype around the Edmonton Oilers. But what have you seen out of this team, and specifically out of guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who are in the primes of their careers and really seem like they're as determined as ever to make this their year?
The more I hear about this Connor McDavid kid, the more I see him play, I think he's a pretty good hockey player, isn't he? Yeah, I think this young man's got a bright future in this sport. Mark my words, Connor McDavid's going to be a star. Of course, that's me doing my worst Norm Macdonald impression possible, but I think the sentiment kind of stands. It's you see the Oilers start off the year in a less than ideal situation. It looks like the wheels are falling off before they're even out of the gate. But the way the franchise has turned things around, the way they've built back up into this exciting run and gun Oilers team that people are knowing and loving to watch, it's exciting. When it comes to the 16 game win streak, it's all I can say is, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. Cheesy as hell? Absolutely. But the fact that the Oilers could get themselves in that conversation with such historically impressive teams as the 92, 93 Pittsburgh Penguins, or perhaps the Columbus Blue Jackets of their win streak. Big ups to Sam Gagner. He's done it twice now, so you love to see it. But the excitement with the Oilers and their win streak, obviously being a little bit more geographically adjacent. I like how you put that. When it comes to being around for the Oilers hype, you feel the same thing in BC, obviously, and a little less when it's a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets. And when they went on their absolutely incredible run of 16 wins, it was I was only be able to take it in from afar through a phone screen or through a keyboard, and it was still absolutely enthralling to witness a team be able to go on a run of that caliber. I remember one of my favorite moments from the Blue Jackets win streak came when they were up against the Minnesota Wild, who are also on I correct me, I believe it was a 13-game win streak to the Blue Jackets' 15-game win streak. And they played against each other on New Year's Eve in an event that came to be known as the Unsustainable. And it was one of the most thrilling hockey events. I used the word thrilling again. Damn it. Anyways, it was a game of all time. And prior to the start of the season, who would have predicted Columbus versus Minnesota as one of the marquee matchups in the NHL that year? But the way that built up so suddenly and so magically, it was just incredible to lay witness to. And the Oilers hype is much the same. As much as I'm not as dialed in with Oilers hockey as I am with Blue Jackets hockey, it's great to see how they get to this point, especially after the start of the year that they have with losing, with Edmonton not being a fun place to be, with goaltending controversy immediately out of the gate. It's got a lot of that same energy as to when St. Louis makes their coaching change after being in last place at the Christmas break and making it all the way to the Stanley Cup final and paying it off. So when it comes to the Oilers, it's a true testament to how they've recovered, how they've been able to build their way and out of this and be patient, because it's so easy for teams to hit the panic button when things start to go sideways, especially early on. I want to talk about the highs and lows of being a Blue Jackets fan. Start the season 0-8, and then watch your head coach get fired. But then you bring in John Tortorella. Not a panic move necessarily, but that's you get to that point where it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's lost. It's time to just pull the chute. But the Oilers make a change. They make a change in net. They make a change for head coach, and they're patient with just about everything else. And it gets them to this point where they are red hot, white hot, and just putting on an absolute show night in, night out. McDavid with 6 assists. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. I don't think anyone can say they're surprised, but it's just so damn exciting. I didn't say thrilling. I'm hyper aware of this now. I need to be better.
So for the next point on our NHL list, I'll stay in the province of Alberta. Calgary's had, a much more consistently negative season than Edmonton. Edmonton and Calgary both kind of started in the dumps, and the Flames.
Oh, they have?
Yeah, the Flames haven't quite turned it around the same way the Oilers have. Shout out to Jonathan Huberdeau, who has figured out how to put up some points here in January. So obviously the $10.5 million man for Calgary, the Flames fans will be happy if he can get going as much as possible. But today, David Pagnotta with some reporting that New Jersey Devils are heavily interested in Jacob Markstrom ahead of the trade deadline. Now, I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense for New Jersey. They're a team who had to ride a very hot Akira Schmid, who hasn't continued that play from last year's playoffs into this regular season. Vitek Vanacek hasn't had a very good season either. Markstrom would be a great piece. And the reason that I think a trade with the Devils would be so alluring to the Calgary Flames, number one, obviously it gets you out of the conference. You don't have to face him in a Western Conference capacity or in a Pacific Division capacity. Obviously, the Los Angeles Kings, another team that are rumored to be in on a goaltender ahead of the deadline, but the New Jersey Devils, despite the fact that they are, on the upswing, or they're attempting to be anyways, they've had a little bit of a tough season themselves, but they're on the upswing after a rebuild. They have managed to keep together a ton of their future assets. They traded Mukamadulin to San Jose for Timo Meier, but that's really the only major future that they've dealt away as part of their push to become better, which means they have a lot of draft picks and a lot of prospects to deploy in a Jacob Markstrom deal. There's one that comes to the top of my mind, but I'll throw it to you, Charlie, first. What kind of a package do you think New Jersey is going to have to put together to pitch to Calgary to get Jacob Markstrom in return?
Before we get into that, I'd just like to mention that has there been any other team in recent memory that has been able to basically point to a player in the NHL and say, him, we want him. And it becomes such a public thing that when it comes to happen, it almost feels like, oh yeah, well, we've been preparing for this. Like last year with Timo Meier being such a coveted piece for the Devils, and you didn't hear about, oh, where could Meier end up? It was, when is Meier getting traded to the Devils? And what's funny is with the chatter about Markstrom being available, obviously it catches your eye in much the same way. When it comes to Markstrom, I feel like there's a premium to be paid. You're not going to be able to just drop a couple of picks in the chat and say, yeah, this is fine. This can get the job done. It's going to take something significant, and there's a couple of elements to this as well. When you look at the depth chart of who they have as what they can offer, obviously my mind goes to can you build something around a first round pick, and let's say, I'm just going to pull a name out of the air here, Santeri Hataka. Would he be someone that the Flames could covet in this deal as they're building up assets in this Calgary rebuild, picking up Brustavich from the Canucks in the Elias Lindholm deal? That's looking like it's going to be in the future a pretty significant piece, and the Flames have the chance to do the same thing with the New Jersey Devils and their assets at the draft. As I'm checking now, they got first rounders for the next 3 years. They've got plenty of picks to work with, and the Flames. Another interesting part of this that I feel is worth mentioning is they have the room to retain salary on Markstrom to make this deal even more appealing. Markstrom, he's just turned 34, so the Flames want to make sure they can get some value for a goaltender that's been very good to them thus far. Has struggled as of late, but has the capability of being an absolute game changer. So when it comes down to that package, I would actually even defer to you. Not that I'm underprepared for the question or anything, but I would be very intrigued to see what kind of proposals there are, especially when you hear news that they've already been talking about what kind of package it would take. And the Flames have reportedly gone to Markstrom to ask him to waive his no movement clause, and he accepted to go to the Devils. And talks apparently have not broken down necessarily, but have fallen off based on what that return could be. And I'm intrigued because it feels like it's going to take a fair bit, but at the same time, it also feels as though the Devils know what they need to do to get themselves into the playoff mix here. They're 2 points out right now from a wild card position. And it's not typical that a team in that position right now, at this stage of the season, being mid-February, to jump into one of those spots. Usually it's a dogfight between the wild card teams of who's going to get that spot. And anyone who's on the outside looking in at this stage usually doesn't quite make it the distance and make that happen. Now, of course, it's still very possible. So the Devils need to be aggressive, and I think they'll be more than willing to make the moves that need to happen to do this. So you got to wonder what's holding it back.
The player I wonder about with the New Jersey Devils, and obviously this was in my head in terms of a potential return before the Elias Lindholm trade happened. Now, you mentioned it already. The Calgary Flames get Hunter Brzustewicz back for Elias Lindholm. That is a American left shot, puck moving offensive defenseman with a lot of upside that looks like he's going to be a very good player. The player that I had in mind for the Calgary Flames is a near identical one. American right shot defenseman Seamus Casey was selected with New Jersey's second round pick in 2022, 46th overall. This guy's offensive upside has no limits. He was one of the best puck handlers, period. Not even just puck handling defensemen, but he was one of the best passers and stick handlers of the puck in the entire 2022 draft class. He was coming out of the U.S. National Development Team. He's at the end of his second full season with the University of Michigan. This defenseman has 34 points in 28 games in his second year with Michigan. And for the New Jersey Devils, you kind of look at their stockpile of young players, and at the top of the list, Simon Nemec and Luke Hughes. So you know that their defense is strong enough that somebody like a Seamus Casey being traded wouldn't be devastating to that prospect core, or that the defense core you envision going into the future with. But the question that I'll have to, ponder at this point is they just traded for Hunter Brzustewicz. They are exceedingly similar players. You are getting two very, very close players if you're getting Casey and Brzustewicz in two different trades for future. So, obviously I do not think Nemec or Luke Hughes or even Dawson Mercer is going to get touched by anybody. I don't think the New Jersey Devils will even entertain an offer for any of the three of them. But you look at somebody like a Seamus Casey and you ask, if Calgary would want it, would that get the deal done?
Certainly. And then another player that could be of interest, and maybe this is just a little bit of name recognition from my part, but Shane Bowers is someone who is, going into being an RFA with arbitration rights, but he's a vaunted prospect, someone who could make a difference. I think is not that far off from the NHL, but is definitely still looking for a decent shot at being on a big roster, but has not quite been able to make that step yet. And having someone that you could work with in that as well, like you got a few pieces that are kind of similar. Graham Clark, you got Arnaud Durando, you got. I previously mentioned Santeri Hataka, Michael Vukojevic. You've got some players that are in that sweet spot of they're just about ripe. They're just about ready to make the step, and that could be someone who, like any of those players or anyone else that we haven't mentioned, could easily be a centerpiece or someone who can project to really make this trade, if and most likely when it comes to be, look all the sweeter in the rear view mirror a few years from now.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm Calgary, if I'm getting out of bed, if a Shane Bowers centerpiece comes across my plate, but it was a second name you said there that to me that's almost a perfect player for the Calgary Flames to be going after, and that's Graham Clark. He's a 22-year-old winger, former third-round pick that is having his second consecutive very solid season with the Utica Comets, and his development continues to trend in that upwards direction. Shane Bowers is the kind of guy where, you look at countless players before with that high upside out of the draft, and then he's just searching for a fit. So I wouldn't at all balk if I'm the Calgary Flames at a package that had Graham Clark and Shane Bowers together, because all of a sudden you're looking at that, you're saying, well, if Bowers can fit in here, you might have the starting fourth line center and fourth line right winger for next season, and two young players with some upside. And if you're Calgary, obviously going through a little bit of a transitional period, that's nothing to turn your nose up at either. I'm glad we got through Alberta. Obviously, those were the two big stories. Tonight, the Vancouver Canucks did beat the Chicago Blackhawks. Big game for that third line. Connor Garland with a pair of goals. Dakota Joshua, a goal, 2 assists, and a fight to get himself a Gordie Howe hat trick. But the win over the Blackhawks, probably not the biggest Vancouver Canuck related news that everybody's kind of paying attention to today. And that is the report that Phil Kessel has traveled to Abbotsford to begin training in Abbotsford in connection with potentially being scouted and being housed by the Vancouver Canucks if a contract offer is coming up. Kessel just won his third Stanley Cup last season, did not sign as a free agent, but still believes he can play, he can contribute. He had 14 goals and 36 points in 82 games with the Vegas Golden Knights last year. Charlie, Phil Kessel in Vancouver, do you like the fit?
This is something that I have been pitching all season long. I've been pushing for this. The only person who could verify this is my roommate Kisser. And Kisser, if you're listening to this, it's obviously the future, and Kessel has signed with the Canucks by now. So I told you so. I told you this was coming. It feels like a perfect fit. Phil the Thrill has a lot to offer, even if the opportunity didn't come right away to start the season. He's a proven commodity. He might not necessarily be that same caliber of player that he was during his 2 cup run with Pittsburgh and with the Golden Knights as more of a depth piece by this stage of his career. But he, by all accounts, seems to be exactly what that Vancouver Canucks dressing room could need, and that is almost just a positive team guy. Good guy, works hard, loves the game. Jamal Mayers has a Stanley Cup ring with Chicago, and he did not play in that 2015 run, but he was still a major part of why they were at that point and how they got there. And he was a glue guy in the locker room. That's something you need. If anyone knows how to get the most out of Kessel, especially with him sort of being on not necessarily the twilight of his career, but definitely at a different stage than the Kessel that we know, love, and meme from the past. If there's anyone who knows how to really communicate with Phil and get that best possible effort and energy and fit from him, it's Rick Tocchet. They've done well together in Pittsburgh, even in Arizona. Tocchet and Kessel, they speak each other's language. That's the first thing that came to my mind as I was envisioning what it would take for the Vancouver Canucks to finally do what I felt has been inevitable and give Kessel's phone a ring, find out if this is going to be a good fit. And Lord knows that like I said, we make memes, we talk a big game when it comes to it, but I gotta hope that having the Costco hot dogs right by Rogers Arena, and you know what? If I'm Costco and I'm smart and this Kessel signing goes down, well, I know exactly what I'm doing with my marketing over the course of the next year. Like it's a slam dunk fit. We were discussing a little bit in preparation for today's episode about what Phil would look like on this Canucks team, and I feel like there's no shortage of golden opportunities of how he could be deployed. I throw this to you, Aiden. Where would you like to see Phil Kessel in this Canucks lineup if everything comes together the way it appears to be moving?
A fully healthy Canuck lineup. I love Kessel right now in the depth chart, I'm going to say fourth line right winger. You can play him on the fourth line with Sam Lafferty and Pius Suter. That's who I project being the fourth line. Suter right now is playing some top 6 minutes, but I think Mikheyev and Hoglander will be the two to round out that group of Pettersson, Lindholm, Miller, and Besser. But what I love about Kessel and having him that even that far down in the lineup is, when's the last time an NHL team made it through an entire playoff run losing no man games to injury? And if the Vancouver Canucks go into the Stanley Cup playoffs and they have an injury in the top nine, to me, Phil Kessel can seamlessly plug in any of those roles. I can totally see him playing with Pettersson and Lindholm. I can totally see him playing, say, with a Mikheyev and a Miller. And if per se Connor Garland goes down, he might be the perfect guy to slot in with Dakota Joshua and Teddy Bluger on that third line that's been so successful for the Canucks. And I think having Kessel there gives you so many options. And obviously, you know, uh, oftentimes the Stanley Cup winner are the teams that are the deepest. And so I really do hope that the Vancouver Canucks making this move will continue to improve upon that depth on the forward group. And, obviously adding Elias Lindholm was a big step in that direction, but adding Kessel as well would, it further solidifies that the Canucks are in an all-in year, and obviously being a Canucks fan, that's nothing but, I'll use your verbiage. That's nothing but thrilling from where I'm sitting.
I mean, hey, this is the thrilling episode. We're talking about Phil the Thrill. That's probably why that word has been so stuck in my brain, because I was just too excited to talk about Phil Kessel on his way to Abbotsford. Brandon Wong posted on Instagram that he spotted Kessel at the airport waiting for his bags, and just seeing that got me fired up. I'm a Canucks fan. I'm a Blue Jackets fan first. I'm a Canucks fan second. But just knowing that this seems to be coming closer to a reality, and it might not end up coming together the way we want it to. Not everything works out perfectly. Let's remember when Owen Nolan made his very brief stint at Canucks camp on a PTO, and in any other given year, you'd say, "Oh, Owen Nolan, holy crap, let's do this." But this was not quite the same Owen Nolan that people remembered, and he was, just wanted to stay fresh. And it didn't end up coming together where he became the next great free agency signing. Didn't quite become even a Matt Sundin kind of legacy player that he was for the Canucks, which is a whole other episode topic, I'm sure. But it might not work out, but it might. And I think the possibilities with if Phil Kessel is ready to go and has a place in that Canucks roster, the team would be very lucky to have him. And I feel like the meme energy could help carry the team to a potential Cup final appearance, as well as just how much of an impact player he could be in that bottom six. I have this weird fantasy in my head, and call it a fantasy, but I feel like he could get here to Vancouver, start playing, and just him and Dakota Joshua or him and Phil DiGiuseppe just become best bros and just rip it up. And all of a sudden that becomes one of those great storylines going into a postseason run. But maybe that's just me getting the fan fiction going a little too early.
So I don't know how much of this podcast you've listened to. James and I will very often do trivia at the end, but if there's ever an opportunity during one of the topics for me to just throw a completely random trivia question at him, I very, very often will. You said Phil Kessel random link up in between 2011 and 2014 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Phil Kessel and one other winger for Toronto had some absolutely unbelievable chemistry. Just kind of out of nowhere, they were both in, kind of the mid to late primes of their career. Obviously, Kessel had a lot of great years in Pittsburgh after he left Toronto, but I'll throw this trivia question to you, Charlie. Who was the winger for the Toronto Maple Leafs that, in especially the 2011-2012 season, formed an unbelievable duo with Phil Kessel and guided both of them to above point per game seasons?
Oh, this feels. I remember watching a fair bit of Leafs hockey in this particular season. I'm gonna tip my cap a little bit and say this was the 2011-2012 year was the first year that I actually watched hockey. As a young man, I didn't didn't get into it until the Canucks actually went on their cup run in 2011, and that year I didn't I kind of got acclimated slowly. My team that year was the inaugural season Winnipeg Jets, having just come over from the Atlanta Thrashers. So my hockey heroes at the time were Tim Stapleton, Antti Miettinen, Johnny Oduya. I am just going to drop as many names to help with whatever puck doku people are working on when they're
Yeah.
listening to this episode. But but lo and behold, I watched a fair bit of Toronto hockey in this year, just to be like, hey, this is a team that everyone's gone on about. Um, was it was it Lupul? Was it
Yeah,
Joffrey Lupul?
absolutely. Joffrey Lupul and Phil Kessel just had and there was a stat in a hockey news magazine that there's no way I'm going to be able to dig up right now, but something like that season to that date, it was only Crosby and Malkin that were that had a higher share of their team's goals or something like that. And it was Kessel and Lupul on this, at the time, very struggling Toronto Maple Leafs team that unbelievably just popped off together. So I guess we can, use this as a as an easy segue into another Toronto Maple Leafs topic. Morgan Riley today gets a 5-game suspension for the cross check delivered to Ridley Gregg. Charlie, I'm of a couple minds when it comes to suspensions. Uh, Look at something like Nikita Zadorov. He just got a 2-game suspension for a hit against, I believe, Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings. What happened with Zadorov, where he was kind of going in to try and hip check Raymond. Raymond made a little move that Zadorov wasn't expecting, and Zadorov lunged awkwardly into the hit, made contact primarily with the head. 2-game suspension. I'm more than okay with something like that. To me, if you make a mistake, if it's clear you're attempting to do one thing and then make a mistake and something you didn't intend to happen results in a dirty play or a hit to the head, I think a fine or a 0 to 2 game suspension is that's the range I'm looking for a mistake like that. Now, I'm of the mind that when a player makes a play that has no hockey reason aside from inflicting pain or injury on their opponent, that's where I think these long suspensions need to come in. I was happy with 6 games for David Perron earlier in the season for a cross check delivered in a game against, I believe, the Ottawa Senators, funny enough. So I thought Morgan Riley's suspension floor should have been 6 games at the minimum because Perron's was. To me, they were very similar instances. Riley gets 5. I would have preferred to see 6 or more. I really don't think there's any I don't really think there's any defense to cross-checking a player in the head after a whistle. Like it didn't seem, I didn't really agree with those defending Riley, and to me it should have been more than 6 games, but he gets 5. What did you think of it?
I think it's right on the money is what it needs to be. I would agree with you that 6 games feels a little bit more right. 5 games is perfectly acceptable in my mind because you bring it up perfectly. When it's an accident or something that goes just a little beyond the control of the player in that circumstance, it leads to something that, oh, yeah, doesn't matter. If you didn't mean to do it, you still shouldn't do it. Pretty simple enough. With Morgan Riley cross check on Ridley Gregg, there's been so much talk about it, so much review of what it should warrant. Obviously, there's a lot of attention that's paid to this because of being the Toronto Maple Leafs. We do live in Canada. You and I, this is the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast, and of course, we would be remiss if we didn't do what everyone else is doing and talk about the center of the hockey universe, Toronto. Does some of that discourse lead to perhaps the difference between a 5 game and a 6 game suspension? I think it does. I think it factors in because of how high profile this was. Perron being suspended 6 games, he cross checked Artem Zub of the Ottawa Senators. So it is interesting that it's oftentimes Ottawa in these situations. They're always kind of in there when it comes to these events, which is an odd coincidence. But 5 games feels right because what? You didn't like the way that he shot the puck into the empty net. That's bush league. It's you know better than to do that. That is your temper getting the best of you in the wrong way. There's no right time to let your temper get the better of you, but it's not needed. It sets the game back even just to say, oh yeah, well that's why he did it, was because he slapped the he's slapped the puck into the back of the net, as I'm tripping over my words. And you don't do that because of unwritten rules or because of the code. Yeah, but is such a, and I feel like I'm going to sensationalize this, by saying it this way, but I feel like it still gets the point across. It was a vicious attack that didn't really need to happen. So is that justified by Greg breaking the code? Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, I hope not. It means that the next time I do something that someone doesn't like the way I do it, they can punch me in the head. So I hope that I would hope that we live in a world where that's not acceptable to do. And I feel like the 5 game suspension for Riley just sets that right. It's like, can't believe we need to have a work meeting about this, but no hitting.
Yeah. No, that's a very fair way to put it. And Toronto will be without him for 5 games. It's going to be a tough stretch for them with already some injuries on that back end, but they've set themselves up, and obviously this is what, this is why those wins in October, November, December matter so much. It's out in the home stretch of the season. If something like this happens, you lose a key player, you can still rely on how strong you were prior to get you through a tough time and wait for those, better days ahead. Last thing, and this is a very me thing to take such an issue with. Reports last week that New York Rangers owner James Dolan is not letting Chris Drury use his first round pick in a trade this year because James Dolan is one of the owners of the Dome in Las Vegas, the Sphere, which is where the draft is being held. It's supposed to be this big extravaganza of a last centralized NHL draft. Don't get me started about how upset I am that they're moving away from that. But
You and me both.
yeah, I figured actually as much. But so James Dolan doesn't let Chris Drury use his first round pick. Charlie, I'm just going to quickly pull up a list of the New York Rangers players for this season in order of how many points they've scored. Artemi Panarin started the season as a 31-year-old. Zibanejad, 30. Kreider, 32. Trocheck, 30. You get to a 25-year-old Adam Fox and a 21-year-old Alexi Lafreniere. That's great. Then it's 31-year-old Erik Gustafsson, 37-year-old Blake Wheeler. Their captain, Jacob Trouba, is 29. Their franchise goaltender, Igor Shesterkin, is currently 28. This is a team that is in a Stanley Cup window, and due to the ages of some of their high-end players, maybe don't have an eternal amount of time in that Stanley Cup window. And I think an owner telling a general manager he can't use as valuable an asset as a first-round pick because you want to be part of a party. If I'm Chris Drury, that's like that is grounds for me to say, then you run the team. Like, well, what am I doing here, right? Like, what's my job if it's not to make this decision? And I thought it was worth bringing up because, at the end of the day, if the New York Rangers don't succeed this year in the playoffs, and part of the reason is they didn't make particular moves that would have helped them, I think that's entirely on this decision that I can't wrap my head around the logic of a hockey owner telling his general manager, don't use this pick so we can be a part of a party.
I was hoping that you would talk about this because I am of a similar mind. I am gobsmacked at the idea that that's going to be what affects asset management for the Rangers. You bring up some excellent points about the players who are producing, for this team right now. And let me posit the next question: how many of those top players, Aiden, were drafted by the New York Rangers, let alone drafted in the first round? Uh, I'll wait. I'll be patient here.
Well,
I'm kind
aside
of
from aside from Alexi Lafreniere falling in their lap at first overall in terms of those high-end scores. And hey, Charlie, if you're trending towards the questioning the New York Rangers development, I'm I'm on board with that. You're definitely not wrong about that. That the Rangers have their asset management and their handling of future assets has been less than impressive, despite the fact that they are such a strong organization.
You're you're making a big deal about having a draft pick in the first round. When was the last time they actually hit on one of those first round picks? I mean, not to dunk on the New York Rangers, but at the same time, why not? Let's dunk on the New York Rangers a little bit. They had Lafreniere fall into their laps. They have Kako at second overall. And they're starting to put up numbers, which is good. But you look at how the team has developed their uh, talent through the draft, and it just isn't there. The Vitaly Kravtsov experiments did not quite work out. Um, you got Braden Schneider, who was a coveted trade piece in years past. I remember when the Canucks were rumored to be linked to the Rangers in some sort of crazy deal to pick up either Lafreniere or Braden Schneider. It's a big part of that. But you got Keandre Miller, another important player for that organization. But beyond that, you're swinging for the fences and you're not doing much with it. This team is not built through the draft. They are built through free agency and clever trades. They are living and dying by the strength of their pro scouts rather than their amateur scouts. And yeah, sometimes you get some real talent come through, but Shestyorkin, he was a fourth round pick. So he wasn't a first rounder. Like he developed into what they wanted him to be, and he was there on a day where, if you're thinking about the prestige of the draft and the high profile, obviously being a first round pick is big, but there's nothing wrong with being drafted on day two. If you get your name called and have a chance to join an organization that knows what you're worth and wants to develop you into the best possible version of yourself you can be, yeah, that's awesome. Whether you're a first round pick or a seventh round pick, whether you're the first pick or the last pick of your particular draft, it's you still got your foot in the door. So for James Dolan to say, "Hey, don't trade that pick because I own the place that the draft's going to be, and we want to be on the stage on the first day," well, do something with it. Like James Dolan has said that he doesn't like being a pro sports owner. He's made questionable decisions. We're not even going to get into some of these accusations that are coming to light about Dolan. Like that's going to be a subject for another day. I'm just going to say it now. But if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying it, then why are you still there? And why are you trying to tell a devoted hockey guy in Chris Drury how he is and is not allowed to uh, build up the team that is, by all accounts, by many who even begrudgingly say it, is probably the closest New York team to in major sports to a championship right now amongst the assembled masses. You're going to tell your GM with a team that's performing well, is on the top end of the conference, and needs those extra pieces to get where they need to go, that, oh, hey, you can't use a first round pick because we want to be in on a party. Like you better be able to really really swing for the fences with other assets if that's the case. Like, I mean, are you going to be offering up an Adam Sikora in a deal instead? A Brennan Othman? Are you gonna use some of that clout, that caliber, to help build up the team? Is this when Lafreniere gets moved? Because if you can't use a first round pick uh, that carries a ton of value. Where do you have value? You got to identify that and then use that accordingly. If the owner is going to tell the GM, no, you can't trade this pick, and it's not even because maybe they're just really good at holding their hand. They're like, there's a guy that we really like who's going to be available at the end of the first round. If that's the case, then hey, that's looking pretty good. Like if they got a guy that they cannot miss out on in the first round, great, power to them. But if it's just because the draft is being held at the Sphere, kick rocks.
Well, I'm glad you and I see eye to eye on that. That's that's about that's about my outlook on it. And Artemi Panarin is one of my favorite players in the NHL. I've got a lot of faith that
Hey,
he can he can do wonders for that team, and the assets they have in place can succeed. But to me, when you're tying your general manager's hands like that, it's you got to feel for the GM. I'm sure Chris Drury would love to have utilized every asset at his disposal. We'll stay in the NHL draft sector. Shine a light on somebody that to me has pulled away from the rest in terms of he's become my consensus, and I say consensus in consensus to my opinion. He's my solidified number 2 prospect as of right now for the NHL draft. That's Russian Ivan Demidov. We were chatting before we hit record. Charlie, I did end up finding the contract status of Demidov. It was a news article that was in Russian, so I had to translate it. But as of May 2022, he agreed to a 3-year agreement with SKA St. Petersburg in the Continental Hockey League. So 2022-23 would have been the first season, 23-24 would have been the second. That means Demidov has 1 more year left on a KHL contract. This kid has been producing like crazy. He's on a 17-game point streak. In that time, he scored 16 goals and 45 points. He's got himself 6 goals and 15 points in his last 5 games. And this is all in the MHL, which is the Russian Junior League. This is not in the Tier 1 KHL. So many Russian prospects have been in the KHL and not got the ice time, and ergo not got the exposure, the chance to show off their skills. So it's really a good thing that Demidov has performed this well in the MHL. He's played 4 KHL games, gone pointless. SKA St. Petersburg, famously a terrible place for young players to play because they are so competitive. They rely heavily on their veterans and older guys. Those young guys get buried in the lineup, don't get very many minutes, if getting game time at all. But we've seen Vasily Podkolzin, we've seen Matvey Michkov, uh, and countless others. Vladimir Tarasenko and Evgeny Kuznetsov, if you go far enough back, come to mind as well in terms of teams being wary to draft guys out of Russia because they are worried that the Russian team that owns them will keep them under contract or they won't come at all. Michkov ends up going 7 to Philadelphia last year. Podkolzin ended up going 10 to Vancouver. Podkolzin, who had a 3-year contract signed in his draft year, played in the KHL for 2 seasons, then came to Vancouver. Matvey Michkov is tearing up the KHL this year. It will obviously soon to be seen when he will come over and join the Philadelphia Flyers. But Ivan Demidov is the next Russian centerman. And to me, he's my number 2 coming in the draft. How much have you seen of this guy? And if you're an NHL team, are you worried about him being under contract in the KHL?
I'll be totally honest with you, Aiden. I've not been able to pay attention as much as I'd like to when it comes to the top draft eligible players, especially out of Russia, out of European leagues. My head has been firmly planted in the sand in North America. Obviously, you're watching a lot more Macklin Celebrini, or at least I have been, like many are. So it's you bringing him up was the first time I ever really thought, oh yeah, what is going on there? And I'll tell you, watching the little bit that I did in prep for this episode, so that you didn't have to be the one to carry all the conversation about Ivan Demidov, is that owner of the Dimsdale Demidov is he looks like he's the real deal. He's played against all sorts of different age groups. Like he's getting those opportunities in the KHL and playing against men. And by all accounts, he's thrilling to watch. He almost reminds me of let me just throw an odd comparison out here, and let me know if you follow along or not. But he almost feels like an Evgeny Malkin for the Connor Bedard era. Like he's got a lot of that same sort of that power to his game, that swagger, that's the beautiful intangibles that hockey fans like us just love, and it is intriguing. I think because of the fact that he is under contract, but because that's going to be up after a year, basically his draft plus 1 year will be his first chance to come over, and it seems as though he is keen to play in the NHL. Like he's not saying, "Oh, I'd rather stay home." He's like, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it." It shows that he's got that willingness, and if the Russian team that holds his rights, whether that's St. Petersburg or if it's another team that ends up acquiring his rights as a result, says no, we want you to stay in the motherland as long as possible. I feel like there's a will, there's a way. There's he's gonna get to the NHL sooner rather than later, and he's in a position to really make some noise and make that conversation interesting, especially when you look at some of the other draft eligible players that you have coming up here for this year. Berkeley Catton, someone I've got a little bit more eyes on, was talked about frequently in the sort of the top of all the mock drafts that I've been seeing. But I feel like the sky's the limit right now. Like a lot of people have their eyes on Celebrini, obviously, but it's allowing players to kind of almost fly under the radar a little bit and say, "Hey, this is why I'm going to be great for whatever team drafts me in that first round." We got an Iginla in the draft coming up, so there's exciting times all around.
I think the most intriguing part about Ty Ginla being in the draft is that by every indication so far, it seems like he will be available when the Calgary Flames have their first round pick. To me, there's a top 10, top 11 group, and then there's everybody else in the first round. Like it's a 2-11, then you have like the 11 to 21 range, and then it's a first round in kind of three tiers for me. And Ty Gimla would be in that second tier, and he kind of in my head would be kind of close to the bottom of it. So if the Calgary Flames miss the playoffs, which it seems that is the overwhelming likelihood right now, their draft position, they'll come close, would be in that 10 to 16 range. That's right before Iginla is kind of being touted to go. Obviously there are outlets that have him ranked higher than that. Like I think the Hockey News has him in the 11-12 range. I just wonder, is Ty Iginla to the Calgary Flames, do you think that's something that the Iginlas and the Calgary Flames would both welcome with open arms, or is that maybe some unnecessary pressure on the kid? Like, how do you view the potential for another Iginla to be moved into the Calgary Flames organization?
I mean, I feel like the coin flip goes either way in this case. The Flames passing on Ty Iginla would be talked about nonstop. It would be the dominant conversation for weeks, if not months, after it happens. If the Flames are in a position to take Ty Iginla in the draft and do not, and then watch him go to another team, like imagine the chaos if somehow the Oilers ended up drafting Ty Iginla, or just or anything else. Really, any other outcome that could possibly be if the Flames are in a spot where they could reasonably expect to draft him, and then someone else comes along and says, "Actually, we're going to take him. We're going to pick him up a pick before Calgary because he's exactly who we've been scouting. We believe in his game. He's going to be just fine, and he's going to be a great addition to the Montreal Canadiens or whomever." That would be one thing. But if he's there and it's reasonable to draft him, like let's say that Demidov ends up falling in the draft to this point, and now the Flames have a decision to make. Do they take Iginla or do they take Demidov? That makes things a lot more complicated, obviously, but it feels like it could go either way because no matter what, you knock on wood, you hope for the best, and you're hopefully never rooting against anybody. I have a feeling that Ty Iginla is going to have a good NHL career no matter where he ends up playing. And he doesn't need it to be Calgary. It'd be great if it was Calgary. But it does put an undue amount of pressure on the player. Let's turn the clock back to when Marty Brodeur took to the stage at the NHL draft and was the one to announce that the New Jersey Devils were drafting goaltender Anthony Brodeur. Yes, his son. And that, of course, places a considerable amount of expectation on the head of a player who could get to that point, but might not get to that point. Anthony Brodeur was a later round pick. He wasn't a first round projected. If he'd been taken first round, I think it would have been quite stunning. But nonetheless, a living legend gets to walk up onto the stage and draft his own son to his team. That's a pretty cool moment, no doubt about it. But at the same time, it places that additional target on the player to, yeah, you've got a lot to live up to now. Like, look at what your dad did for this team. And it wouldn't be a bad thing for a player to be outside of that or to not have as much pressure on them. Like if the Blue Jackets were in a position to draft Ty Iginla before Calgary, let's say, and they went for it, I think that'd be great. Yeah, a good place to fly under the radar, be able to put in the work, and get to where you want to be, and have a damn good pro career. For Iginla, it'd be great if it's Calgary. I think it'll be great if it's not too. So I think it all depends on how the chips fall when we get to that point, and where exactly. Who knows? Maybe he might fall to the Rangers, and hanging on to that pick is going to look absolutely great for James Dolan. See, it all comes full circle.
Don't want to speak for you, Charlie, but Columbus right now has the fourth best odds at the first overall pick. So if I'm a Blue Jackets fan, I'm hoping for a little bit better than Ty Iginla. I'm hoping we get a positive draft lottery result right now, and of course the prizes at the top of the draft. And this draft will be really interesting, and obviously it's going to be one that we'll continue to cover. Currently, Tarik Paraskak is a Prince George Cougar in the WHL. He's ranked anywhere between really the 14-15 range into the late 30s, early 40s of the second round by various outlets. We talked about him on this podcast earlier this season when he came to the Prince George Cougars as a WHL rookie and just absolutely lit it up after spending last season with Edge School U18 prep. I just mentioned that because if you're listening to this right now, this episode's going to come out. Charlie and I are recording this on Tuesday, February 13th. It'll drop on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. And then the next episode that comes out will be James and I interviewing Tarik Paraskak, talking about his draft years so far, talking about how excited he's going to be to go to the first round at the Sphere in Vegas. So obviously stay tuned because that'll be the next episode after this one. Back-to-back very fun guests for this podcast, and I'm stoked about that. Charlie, we've had a lot of fun. I'm going to kind of pivot here to less of a fun topic.
But a necessary topic nonetheless.
Yeah, and yeah, very necessary because I'll introduce this topic in the most positive way I can, and that is what the aftermath has been. There was a podcast that made a negative comment about Patrik Laine and him entering the player assistance program. Fans have donated over $10,000 to a fund that Patrik Laine set up to benefit men's mental health initiatives. That is amazing. So huge shout out to both the hockey community and of course the Columbus Blue Jackets fan base for pledging the support to Patrik Laine, both in terms of their the words and the action of donating to these initiatives. It's amazing. I don't really think it's too necessary to kick the particular people who made this comment as of right now. There's been a lot of criticism levied towards them. What I will say is men's mental health is such an such a big thing in hockey, and the player assistance program has made great strides to being there to support these players, but um this just shows that it's still not fully accepted for a player to seek that help, and it should be nothing but accepted for a player to seek that help. And it was very sad to me to see the comments made to him, and I just wanted to throw it to you as a Blue Jackets fan, Charlie, just to get your 2 cents on Patrick Laine and the support that you're no doubt sending his way.
Absolutely. As a Blue Jackets fan, as a Line A fan, as someone who's followed him since he came into the league with Winnipeg, as someone who I don't necessarily model my game after Patrick Laine, because I'm a filthy heathen who cannot play hockey. But I do model my life game after Laine. Between lounging during a pre-draft interview, just like fully horizontal, chilling in bed, that kind of swagger. I love Laine for this. I love him for a great many things. His play on the ice, his goal scoring, his suit game, looking like an absolute video game villain from 1986 on the Commodore 64. I absolutely love it. But as a fan of his and as just another empathetic human being, who wants what's best for everybody and doesn't want to see anybody hurt, it is indeed gratifying to see the amount of support that is coming the way of Laine in this. It's a disgusting situation that it even has to come up in the first place. Obviously, if anyone's curious as to exactly what it is that we're talking about, we won't broach the subject too deeply because it is well documented already. And again, we don't need to kick anybody else about this. But the comments that were made obviously were of a derogatory nature towards men's mental health and seeking assistance when assistance is needed. It brings up an incredibly dark subject that has been tough for many to talk about, and to trivialize it in that way. Um, can we actually discuss, like, can we say what was said? Like,
Yeah,
can
if
we?
if you want to, I'm more than okay with that. Yeah, go ahead.
For sure, yeah. It's always a bit of a tricky thing, and I don't want to broach anything without being able to give it the proper attention that it needs. But to to say, hey, well, so and so's not playing this year. He's these guys are weak. They're not tough. Like he's gonna have a Remington retirement. That was the first time I'd actually heard that phrase, and it just about brought me to my knees that someone could be as insensitive as to suggest so trivially that someone would be having the thought of ending their life, and the idea that it's a joke, that people would just say, oh yeah, ha, 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 or not know how to respond to that, um, because who would say that, who would bring that up so glibly and it just be okay. As someone who has, like many, struggled with maintaining positive mental health, I've been to some dark places, and I'm glad to say that I've survived. But I've not been without my struggles, and I would be absolutely up the creek without a paddle, if it weren't for some of the resources that exist today for people who have those intrusive thoughts, for people who are suffering from poor mental health outcomes, who just need a break, which is what the NHL player assistance program was designed for. And it's something that has not really been as key and at the forefront of the conversation as it should have been, but is getting there now. Yes, there's an uphill battle, But the fact that the resources are here to begin with, that a player who is struggling with whatever ails them, whether it's addiction, substance related, mental health related, or just uh, fatigue, whatever the case. Sometimes you just need to hit the pause button, and there's not a damn thing wrong with that. In fact, the strength that goes into asking for the help or seeking the time to better oneself is is way more than any notion of weakness that may be perceived, along with, oh, these guys are multimillionaires, they're pro athletes, that this is what they do for a living and they need to take a break. Come on, I want to watch people skate around really fast and put a plastic disc into the back of the net, and I'm not going to care about anyone's mental well-being if that's what it takes.
Yeah, Charlie, you're absolutely right. And in the podcast description, I'll throw the link to the Canadian Public Health Services website that has all of the help resources available online by province sorted there. So if anybody listening is struggling with anything, do your best to use the resources at your disposal and know that there's always going to be somebody there for you, and you're always going to be in somebody's thoughts. Um, uh,
Absolutely, and props as well, of course, to Patrick Laine for being able to turn around what started out as a real a grenade being thrown into the henhouse of how could anyone make such comment about this, to, hey, we really need to improve the conversation around mental health, especially as it relates to athletes and just men. Uh, we don't typically talk about these things. We're expected not to talk about it, and to be able to draw attention and say, seriously, are you guys serious, and then spin around and say, hey, we need to be better, and turn that into such a great opportunity for people to show their support and to help with uh, with mental health resource availability at anywhere and everywhere that needs it. That is incredibly admirable and really speaks to the character of Patrick Laine and just how good of a person he is and how much it would suck if he wasn't around anymore. So we are with you, Patrick. It goes without saying. I mean, I hope it goes without saying, but we stand with you. We are incredibly, incredibly proud of how you are taking a rough time in your life, and even with everything that's being thrown your way, you're turning it into a force for good, and that deserves a serious stick tap. So stick taps from here.
Absolutely. No, I completely echo that sentiment. And Charlie, this has been, well, again, I think I am going to call this the thrilling episode featuring Charlie Black, because it was a lot of fun to have you on, a lot of fun to talk to you. Obviously when I was, when this podcast started, I was thinking of guests. I was like, we have to have Charlie on in the off season just so he can talk and answer our questions for 90 minutes just about jerseys, because he's the that's such a fun niche of his, and that hasn't come together yet, but this
I
is not
got
the
time.
last time. Yeah, this is not the last time that you're going to be on this show, because that's absolutely in the future. And in the time of the summer where there's not a lot of news to go over, I just want to park as much time as you'll give us about just some of the most interesting and random Jersey facts you can throw at us, or facts about anything else, because like I said, you're kind of my hockey encyclopedia when there's something I don't know. So thanks for giving me the time you already have, and Charlie, like I can't wait to do this again.
But likewise, Aiden, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting me blab about anything and everything that came to my mind. Give me a call anytime about jerseys. Give me a call anytime about hockey. You want to hear about my plans to, if I were expanding the AJHL, I'll tell you all about exactly where I'd put teams, and I've already got jersey designed for all of them. So come see me anytime you want. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad that you're willing to have me back. I haven't blown it yet, but don't worry, there's plenty of time for that. Aiden, thank you.
To everybody listening, thank you so much for listening. We'll get James Parisi and Tarek Paraskak on the next episode of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. But for now, enjoy yourselves your Valentine's Day, and let's roll that outro.